Hello, everyone. Welcome to You Never Believe It, but another episode of Building Your Business. Today, we are lucky to have Rick Francis, Foresight Building Inspections from Southeastern Wisconsin, and as we talk, probably the conqueror of the world as he grows well beyond Southeastern Wisconsin. But welcome, Rick.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rob. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're gonna go through some of the basics first. I
Uh-huh.
want to learn about you. I want to learn about your history. I want to learn
Yep.
about your commercial journey. So, so let's just start out real simple. Where are you located?
So I'm located out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My office is based out of Menominee Falls, just outside of Milwaukee, but southeastern Wisconsin.
Okay. How far do you typically travel?
It depends on if it's what type of call I'm getting, but for example, tomorrow I'm going about 2.5 hours out, uh, and then 2.5 hours back. So a couple hundred miles, I will. It depends on the job and what we work out with the client. And typically, where I'm at, the clients are more than willing to uh, pay for my travel time as well.
Well, the good news, if you go 2.5 hours out, you come two and
Hmm.
a half hours back, you're home.
Yeah, yeah.
If you went 2.5 hours out and only came back an hour and a half, then you're gonna be somewhere around Madison and lost.
Wouldn't be lost. We just have to find lunch, and then it's Wisconsin, so we probably find a bunch of beer and cheese.
There you go. Uh, so how long have you been a professional inspector?
So I got started on the residential side. I started training probably about 10 years ago. I
Okay,
think I did my first inspection in 2016. So I've done about 3,000 inspections.
that's incredible. And what's interesting is you are already a master inspector, which is a certified master inspector, which is awesome. I know it
Mhm.
takes a lot of effort to get that, and so congratulations on that.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
So when I look at your signature, I know it says on your shirt Foresight, but you've got
Mhm.
another building name on your signature. What is that?
So my email signature you're referring to, it also includes Shamrock Building Inspection Consultants. So when I started in on the residential side, many years back, I had a mentor I was able to work under, and that's kind of been my strategy in business, was to find people to learn from. Tom Dempsey was my mentor, and he owned Shamrock Building Inspections. And he was a very well known inspector. He was one of the first certified inspectors in the state. And he retired about a year and a half ago. And at the time of him retiring, uh, it was around the time I kind of had it in my mind that maybe I wanted to try commercial. I wasn't ready for it yet, but at some point I want to try commercial. Tom had a very big footprint and stronghold in the commercial side of the business in the whole state, per se. And so when he retired, I essentially bought out the commercial sector of business from him. And so I kind of had to make a decision when I bought out that sector of business. How do I want to run the business? For other people who have watched the Building Your Business series, you've heard where some people maybe just do commercial as ancillary services, or they start up a whole separate business. I kind of had to decide what to do there. But again, it kind of, I don't want to say it sprung up on me, but I just wasn't prepared in life. I just had a baby. I wasn't ready at that moment. I'm a planner. I kind of take things slow, and I wasn't ready. And so um essentially I said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work and set up Foresight as a commercial company, convert it over. Instead of commercial being ancillary service, residential is now going to be ancillary service. And it was just easier in that quick transition with the accountant and whatnot to say, hey, let's just stick with Foresight Building Inspections, and use Shamrock just for marketing purposes. So leave the website out there, but the website tells a
Mhm.
story of the transition from Tom to me. Um, and the Google is still out there, and it's still the marketing is still there, but everything runs through Foresight Building Inspections. And so I try to leave that story out there, so when people call and they're expecting, hey, we're going to get Tom, or his wonderful wife Deb, that would answer the phone a lot. They're not confused as to why I'm there on the other side of the phone. So I wanted there to be an explanation for all of Tom's clients that he had in the past, that, hey, Rick also owns Shamrock. So if Rick answered the phone, it's Foresight Building Inspections. Um, don't worry, Rick didn't steal the phone number. It's not something illegal going on. It's not a scam. There was an agreement between us.
A lot of people don't think about that. A lot of people don't think about how more seasoned inspectors are thinking of transitioning out of the industry, and
Hmm.
how you can take and make it a smooth transition into almost a legacy company. And that's what it sounds like. That's what you did. Is Shamrock is a legacy into
Hmm.
Foresight.
Yep, 100%. Again, I had a relationship with him because that was my mentor. That's who I started with before I started my own company. Um, and he has such a big brand. And so even at this point, I'm sure we'll touch base on it later, but a lot of my work comes from the footprint he had. I mean, that's why I'm driving 2.5 hours north tomorrow. He had a cabin up north, which if anybody's listening and they knew Tom, they know that that was his retirement dream, was to move to that cabin, him and his wife, and they've done that. But because he had that cabin, he had such a big footprint, up north and out west, that a lot of people didn't cover. And again, I still get a lot of leads out that way. So, um, it's been a benefit to me to be able to lean on his reputation. And a lot of people saying, hey, if Tom helped train you, and Tom trusts you with his company, I'm going to trust you as well.
That's terrific. So I guess let's dive into it because we've already opened up the box.
Mhm.
So when you transitioned from from just yourself and thinking about getting commercial and absorbing Tom's company, what was one of the major headaches that you experienced in doing that?
Well, some of the challenge was, again, I'm a person, and I'm a planner. I take my time with rolling things out. Luckily, I had just graduated from something called the ACRE program, Associates in Commercial Real Estate. And it's a program geared towards helping people become developers. But I took I was involved in the program really for networking purposes. I was one of the only, I am the only inspector that ever have gone through that program. And I just graduated from there. Again, we just had a baby. I had a lot of stuff going on in life. And so I knew that, hey, I wanted to buy out the company. I wasn't ready. And I had to come up with a plan, and kind of rapidly. And not only a plan for the business sake, but also how do I get trained? Tom's retiring, and I can call Tom anytime in Buckland. But if I call Tom, he's in the middle of the woods cutting down a tree for firewood or to build a desk or something like that. He's a traditional carpenter. Um, so I knew I needed to find a way to, one, how am I going to make this business transition happen? But two, how am I going to be trained to actually perform this service? And so I had to figure out, okay, what standards of practice am I going to use? Am I going to run things just like my mentor ran it, or am I going to do things a little bit differently? Am I going to use his software? Am I going to use my software? Am I going to jump over to Shamrock's, brand per se, and abandon Foresight? So I had to kind of think through a lot of that, and the biggest piece was training. How do I get trained? So I did a bit of research on different places where I could get trained and go take classes and whatnot. And some of the classes were periodic. Some of them weren't going to be available for a couple months. But one thing I know about branding, is that if I said, hey, I'm going to buy Shamrock and I'm just going to sit out 6 months. It's June now, and I'm going to sit out 6 months and I'll start fresh then. It's our companies can lose momentum so fast,
Hmm.
if you're not available to provide services. Somebody else will fill those shoes. So I knew that I had to, as rapidly as I could, get things together and get trained. And so, I searched a couple of different classes out, and I just, nobody was readily available, or the class wasn't going to be for a couple months. But on YouTube, this Rob guy in CCPIA, I could YouTube, and there was like classes on there, or there was these building your business classes. I'm like, wow, this guy, it's an offshoot of Internachi, which I was already a member of. And I'm like, I'm kind of watching these videos and learning already. And I'm like, okay, well, how much is the training going to be over here? Okay, this place wants $2,000 for commercial training, but I can join the CCPIA, and, I think it's $400 a year. And I got all these classes readily, available to me, and I can take the classes, as I need, and then the other piece of it was figuring out what standards of practice am I going to use. And now that I've gotten further in the business, I understand that I can utilize the ComSOP versus ASTM for different purposes and different ways. But at the time, I said I need something concrete to learn, and I really liked with the ComSOP. One, it was something that anybody had access to. If I could send it to a client and say, "Hey, um, This is what's included. This is what's excluded. And I think that's a big thing specifically to say, hey, what's excluded? We're not required to remove those three-phase electrical panel covers. I think that's critical and making sure that you and the client is on the same page. So it kind of made sense for me to lean to CCPIA for training, to lean to the ComSOP for helping establish how I conduct a commercial property inspection. Um, so it became kind of a thing where I was trying to take all these classes and kind of set up marketing and do a phone number transfer. But at the same time, we literally had an infant. So I'm trying to take a class, and my wife is like, "Hey, bring me more diapers, bring me more bottles." And she took on most of the work, but I can't complain. She did most of the work, but there was certainly a balance along with running the property inspection business and residential that I was already doing. So I think figuring out where I was going to get training, figuring out which standards of practice I was going to use, figuring out how to utilize my software to meet commercial inspection standards. I think those were the big challenges initially.
Yeah, it's I hear the software pain all the time from inspectors because there's really not a true commercial software. Everything is a morph from a residential software, and a lot of the softwares lack that nimbleness or the
Hmm.
dexterity to go into
Hmm.
a large commercial building with fluidity.
Hmm.
So you decided, I think your decision was almost handed to you as as you realized, shucks, if I don't jump into this, I'm going to lose all that inertia. So,
Yep.
so did you immediately go out and were doing ride-alongs with your mentor, as a mentee, or were you just literally thrown into the lake?
No, my mentor Tom, he had an injury, so he just, he that was part of him retiring. It
Yeah.
was kind of something that forced him to retire. So I didn't do any ride-alongs,
Ah.
and it was I pretty much took on the jobs, and there were a couple times where I would record things. I remember going into one of my first big electrical rooms and just recording everything and just sending it to him. I'm like, hey, can we go over this? And the beauty in commercial for people who are starting in commercial is that a lot of times the client's not following. You got a 50,000 square foot office building. No one's going to ask you, why are you in your cell phone? Why are you, sometimes if you have to look something up, or if you have to reach out to a plumber and send a picture of your HVAC contractor, to send them a picture just to say, hey, what's this and how does this work? And that's how some of my inspections went initially. And some elements or some components of the building and saying, hey, I'm going to take pictures or video of this. And while I'm here, I'm going to send it to a contact I have, and see what they have to say and can explain what I'm seeing. And so that's kind of what I did. And you take the time ahead of time to take the training classes and whatnot, and you get there, and it's nice you can just kind of go at your own pace. There's
Yeah.
nobody bugging you about getting out of their house. The people in the office doing their job don't care that you're in a utility room, a little bit longer than maybe another inspector would have been. So I kind of got just thrown into the fire, and I just had to lean to my resources as much as possible. And sometimes I feel like I kind of learn better in that situation. You just have to stay calm, stay in control, be honest, with clients and say, hey, I want to dig into this a little bit more, or I want to consult with, my commercial electrician in regards to this particular topic, and I'll follow up with
Mhm.
you. Um, I don't think people ever have a problem with you being honest and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go to somebody who knows way more about this topic to make sure we get the right answer." And over time, I find myself leaning to that a lot less, but that's how it was for me starting off.
I think that's a very important thing to remember is you're a consultant. You're a well-paid consultant. And
Mhm.
not every consultant is a perfect walking dictionary of everything in any building or any topic. And knowing
Mhm.
where to lean on, where to get help, I think that's why your clients hire you, is to
Mhm.
give them answers. And if you got to go outside your personal comfort zone to find those answers, at the end of the day, the client's going to be tickled pink that they're knowledgeable about their building.
And in the end, the client, I mean, 85-90% of commercial clients are just looking at the end report. They'll stop by for a moment. They may
Yeah.
not show up at all, but they're just looking at the end report. And if it's polished and it's really clean and you have really good information in there, they're not going to really care, or even know that you consulted with, a solar specialist because you wanted to give some insight on the solar panels that were on the roof, or you had to research these split unit cassettes that you've never seen before in the ceiling. you know, they're not going to know or care that you took some time to dig into those because you've only seen them once out of all the inspections you've done. So, so yeah, I mean, the report is the key, and it was the
Yeah.
same way in residential. A lot of things in residential really transfers over to commercial just on a grander scale. In residential, what mattered the most was how you report ended up, and it's the same thing in commercial as well.
Yeah. So I want to, I'm dying to ask, and I'm trying to figure out the right way to ask. I don't want to know money, don't care about money. But a lot of people are in the same position that you were, where your mentor was with his firm. Let's go about that process for a minute. And again, I don't want to talk about money, so I'm not going to
Mhm.
ask that. Um, so what was the process of you taking over somebody else's brand? Was it an outright purchase? Was it a, let me ask you this, and you can feather in the answer you want. Was it an outright
Mhm.
purchase? Was it a payment plan purchase? Was it a percentage of revenue purchase? How did that work?
So they essentially made an offer. They just emailed me and made an offer and said, "Hey, you've done a great job with your own business. We'd love for you to continue to carry on the tradition. And we know that you were gearing up, maybe doing a commercial at some point. And this is going to be the cost. You can buy out our company. These are the assets you'll get. You can buy out the company. You can use the brand. Our software that we put together. They used the old iHit software that they kind of Frankenstein for commercial per se, for lack of better terms. And they said this is the price, and uh, you know, and so right away I knew I wanted to do it,
Mhm.
and so I kind of had to think about and talk with the accountant, and you talk with the attorney, and you do some research, and you say, okay, how do I want to again run this business and operate it? And so what I decided to do, just because I kind of Tom is Irish. Shamrock Building Inspections is him.
Mm.
Foresight Building Inspections is a brand that I built up and put together. And so I didn't necessarily want to work underneath his brand, not that there was anything wrong with it, but it was just easier accounting wise and business purposes to just stick with Foresight. So what I actually did technically is I actually did an asset purchase with rights to the
Mm.
name. So it made it a lot cheaper because I just took what I wanted. I shouldn't say I took, I purchased or acquired what I wanted: the
Right.
phone number, the website, the software. I didn't purchase any technology, but if I wanted laptops or things like that, I could have purchased those things. I just said, hey, I want to buy the phone number. I want to buy these things, rights to the names. Now, if I wanted to go back right now and say, and I still talk to them, Tom and Deb, I talk to them like once a month at least. If I said, hey, you know what, I'm just going to do a complete offshoot underneath Shamrock, I have the rights to do that. They're
Yeah.
not really doing anything with the brand or the name. So I really just purchase assets, um, in the right to, use the name essentially. And it helps me out because there's elements of the business I don't have to take on. So, if somebody calls and says, hey, I need a report from 5 years ago from Shamrock Building Inspections, I just have them contact Deb, and Deb will take care of that if something old pops up. And although Tom's happy and free, Deb's a little bit bored and she's happy to take on, certain things per se, like that. So that made the acquisition a lot cheaper because again, I just purchased the assets that I wanted to grow with, which primarily the phone number was the biggest deal.
That makes it the cleanest. I like what you did because it's in my experience, that's the cleanest. It's
Hmm.
it's a cutoff date. It's I got the assets I want. I got we've got this mutually beneficial transaction. You got what you want, they got what they want. You all leave each other happy. Where I've seen deals where, okay, I've got a 5-year percentage deal.
Hmm.
Well, what if what if one of the two parties isn't as excited about it as the other one,
Hmm.
or I've got a 5 year you're going to hang around policy, and so now they're kind of sitting there at a desk, not really working but kind of working,
Hmm.
and boy, when you can just sit there and go March 1st,
Yeah.
done, and it's just like boom, sink or swim, and I
And
love that.
part of the agreement, we knew that Tom wasn't going to be able to quote unquote train me, which I think was one of my requests. He just wasn't physically able to,
Mhm.
was that they serve as consultants for a period of time.
Yeah,
So I can call and ask questions, which I think I can call them 5 years from now and ask questions, and they'll be up to it. So
yeah,
when I first started, Deb would help me out with pricing. There were a lot of jobs when I was figuring out office building this size versus industrial that size, where I could lean to Deb to help me figure that out, which is Tom's wife. So
yeah,
it's been great, and I think that they appreciate that. I kind of carry on the brand and reputation probably the way that they would. And I am who I am in this business because of Tom, and because of Deb. And I would say any inspector that's out there, they're retiring, they're going away. COVID kind of pushed retirement on a lot of inspectors, but if you can find somebody to learn from, and CCPIA has the mentorship program, but find somebody to learn from and listen to. And that's how older generations progressed. It wasn't the internet. They had somebody that was a mentor to them per
yeah,
se. Even if it costs you something to get that mentorship. But a lot of old school mentors, it doesn't cost them anything but respect. You treat them with respect, you listen to them, you shut up respectfully and listen to them. And sometimes you'll talk to people and they'll say things and you'll say, I'm not going to apply that. I'm not going to use that. You don't have to tell them that, but you listen
mhm,
to, your elders per se in business. We had I came to your training last March, and, if you pay attention, you eventually this older guy in the corner kind of spoke up, and I said, wow, that guy really knows his stuff. And it was Charles Belafonte out of Chicago, and I
mhm,
said, and since then I said, okay, I got to exchange numbers with that guy, and since then we've been in contact and I've picked up a few things from him. And so that's kind of my strategy. And anybody in this business, it's awesome to lean to these videos. It's awesome to listen to Rob in his videos, or Dylan, or contacting Lance. But there's some guys in this business that might be retiring soon, and not only can you learn from, but maybe potentially you can purchase their business.
mhm.
That was the first thing. The first night I met Tom, in the parking lot next to his Harley Davidson, he said, "One day you could buy my business." And in my head, I guess I kind of blew it off, but that's what ended
Yeah,
up happening.
yeah. It's even myself. I mean, I go back. This is, I think, my 35th year in the industry. I had a mentor. I mean, even 35 years ago, I had somebody that taught me the ropes, and
Mhm.
gave me the support, and kicked my butt when I made a mistake, and patted me on the back when I did a good job, and
Mhm.
was there to make sure that I grew into a very competent professional inspector. And it sounds like you're doing the same thing, which is wonderful to see. So you got thrown to the fire. I mean, I remember our conversations from a little over a year ago. You got thrown to the fire. You've bought your mentor, or you've bought this firm, and now you need to be trained. I know you took a bunch of our online training, and I know you came to our live class. Did you find that both of those were your springboard into really launching where you're at today?
Yeah, the in-person class was, I think, really the bigger springboard. The online classes were great, but the challenge with online is that life happens, and you start a
Yeah.
class. I got a few classes out there right now that I'm halfway through and didn't complete per se. And life happens, so you don't finish them. But when you go to that 3-day class, you're there, and Rob's there to answer questions, and there's a couple other experienced inspectors around you can bounce stuff off of, and networking is so important, especially when you're taking these classes out of town. And I went to Chicago for mine, and these aren't competitors. A lot of times you kind of wonder what kind of guidance you get from somebody that's a competitor, but they're in a different market, so they're not competitors. They're going to be as helpful as they can, and you can grow together and learn together. And so the 3-day class really helped out a ton. The online classes were great as well, but being able to be there in person, Last week was my first Internachi Pro Inspectors Convention, and we had the CCPIA or commercial track. That was, awesome. I don't think I'll ever miss a Pro Inspectors Convention again as long as there's a commercial track there. Those in-person classes and the connections, the Facebook group, one time, if someone watching this has never heard Rob speak, sometimes Rob would tell you to take on those challenges or those things you're intimidated by. And right off the back, you just say, yep, I can do it. I'm the best. And then you figure it out. And that's essentially what I did when I first started. But I think I got somebody reached out for at the time. They told me it was 1 million square foot, 1.1 million square feet warehouse, another building that was 300,000 square feet. And I'm like, do I even take this? And I went to the CCPIA Facebook group, and I'm like, should I even take this? Do I hire out a bunch of people? How should I handle this? And Rob's like, call me if you need to. Lance Kaufman is like, call me if you need to. And I ended up speaking with Lance because I try not to bother Rob so much because I know that he tells us all to call him, so I'm sure he gets 20 calls a day. But Lance was a great resource in helping me price that job. Led me to a bunch of other jobs for that particular company that were really big jobs. Um, and it didn't end up being 1.1. They had a number wrong. It was more like 300,000 and the 200. They have a bunch of buildings, big warehouses that they've had me check out. But I wouldn't have been confident if I didn't have CCPIA or that Facebook group to lean to, or if Lance didn't take the time to get on the phone with me and say, look, when you get in there, there's going to be just a ton of pallets. This is it's going to be a big box. There's going to be a ton of pallets. You're not looking at all the pallets. Um, and Lance taking that time out, that was the first time I interacted with him, helped me kind of figure out how to work through this and time it and price it. Um, so again, those CCPIA resources have the not just the online classes, but even more so when you can interact with the trainers, with other experienced inspectors who have been in a CCPIA for a while.
You said something interesting that I wanted to touch on, and that's worried about your local competition.
Hmm.
And and I've never ever, mm, yeah, I think I can very safely say I've never ever worried about competition in commercial. And the
Hmm.
reason is there are so many different types of inspections. It's not like residential, where
Hmm.
you've got just the residential inspection done.
Hmm. Hmm.
If you're in Wisconsin, it's what Wisconsin regulates a home inspection or residential
Hmm.
inspection looks like. In
Yeah.
commercial, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of different types of inspections you could do
Hmm.
that don't even involve the transaction.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so you could have peers and good friends in your marketplace that you never even you're in contact with for the camaraderie and the resource, but you don't even butt heads against each other because you're in two
Yeah.
different sectors.
Yeah,
And
yeah. For example, when I first started, I reached out to some commercial inspectors and said, "Hey, I'm going to be taking on a load." A couple guys that I know that had been doing it, in my area per se, and a couple of them never responded or kind of blew me off. And I have
yeah.
some funny stories about that. But there was one guy, Dino Flores, I had never worked with him before, but since then we've bounced stuff off of each other. We've been a resource to each other. There's going to come a time I'm going to need help. I'm going to call him to give me a hand on this big hotel maybe I'm going to take one day, and vice versa. Um, so that that certainly has been awesome to kind of have a different type of camaraderie because business is a bit different on the commercial side.
Yeah, I use the term collapetition. They're
Hmm.
colleagues
Hmm.
and their competition. But in
Hmm.
more times than not, we're collaborating all the time. And I think you hit it on the head. You're going to have a big job and you're going to need somebody in your bullpen. And
Hmm.
why not get somebody else that's equally qualified, equally trained, equally competent? Because
Hmm.
if you're gonna bring them on a site, you got to be able to trust what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah. And now I've built rapport with them. We'll be able to work through it. But luckily, even with big buildings, I've been able to work through them independently by following the ComSOP
Yeah.
and lean into the training and whatnot.
So what's your largest building so far?
About 400,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So it's a
At the
warehouse.
end of the day, It's just a box.
Yeah, yeah, it's just a box. Some of the more challenging ones are where there's a big box that's split up a bunch of ways. I have one that comes to mind in Green Bay, right on the port, and there had to be six different businesses in there. You
Wow.
had a distillery in there, and you had a car shop in there, and there was just the challenge with those is that there's so much going on that your mind kind of shifts. When you inspect an industrial building or office building, your mindset's a little different. But when they're running a few different things out of this 250,000 square foot building, your mind, when you're considering fire separation and life and safety based on the different type of businesses are there, it's kind of easy to get thrown around a bit. But it's a good challenge, and that's part of the shift from residential to commercial is everyone has to grow, and
Hmm.
you get to a point in residential where you say, I kind of want a new challenge or I want to grow. Believe it or not, it's freed up my time. I have a daughter
Yeah.
that's 18. I have a daughter that's 18 years old, and I have a son that's 18 months. So even though I was there for my daughter, I just see how much time flies. And with commercial, I'm going to one job versus residential. I might have been driving to two or three different jobs. Commercial, I can end my day in a decent amount of time versus doing two or three residential jobs in a day. I might leave the house at 6:30 a.m. and not finish till 11 p.m.
Yeah. So have you almost separated entirely from doing residential?
Somewhat. The commercial folks, and I do consider myself a certified commercial property inspector. First and foremost, uh, some perspective is that we just leave and we run from the residential side, and not to say that they're wrong, but those residential realtors that we have a great camaraderie, great relationship with, great rapport, they could potentially send you leads as well. And not only will they
Absolutely.
can they potentially send you leads, but there's commercial realtors that are in their office. So if you just completely abandon them, disappear on them, that's going to hurt leads that could come from that direction. And further, those are good fillers. I had a week that was really slow. I average somewhere between three to four commercial inspections a week. But I had a week where I didn't have any, and I was able to fill it in with residential. And we also have to keep in mind, why do we do this? And the big reason why I started in this business was to help educate and protect people. And so I can still lean to that if I'm doing one or two residential inspections a week where
Hmm.
I'm still getting that personal fulfillment and helping somebody, helping a young nurse that's out on her own, just trying to figure things out, and her family's in another state. And then I'm staying polished. I'm staying polished on the residential side, staying within my process because the process is big. You have a residential process and you have a commercial process, but so long story short, I haven't completely abandoned it, but it's kind of by choice. I don't think that I ever fully will. But if somebody calls me randomly and I've never worked with them, I'll give them to my partner. What I did was, instead of hiring an inspector, is I essentially partnered up with a newer inspector, and I said, "Hey, I'll be your consultant here. I'll teach you to do everything the way I did it, just like if they were an employee. Here's the software I use. Here's all my verbiage. If you're going to do things the way I'm going to do it, I'll shoot you over, my overage and leads, the work that I can't take on, and I'll review your reports and I'll make sure stuff looks good. But he's his own entity, so that's more reliable inspections in Milwaukee, and I send him a lot of work I can't take on. Sometimes he'll come on my residential inspections with me. Sometimes I'll go with him. And we're separate entities, but again, I technically or legally serve as a consultant for him.
That's it warms my heart though, Rick, to hear you talk about how you got into this business to help. And I hear more and more, from different sources of I got into this business because I saw one get done and it seemed like easy money.
Yeah.
And
Well, for me,
and
I bought my first house when I was 19, and I owned and managed properties throughout those years. And what we had that was going on, and it still goes on, is there's a get the deal done inspectors,
yeah,
and they would come out and just say everything's fine just to get the deal done. And in our area in particular, a lot of our minority community, I think we're the second least represented legally like in the country in this area per se. And so a lot of people don't realize there's legal recourse, and a lot of the inspectors knew that. Um, and so I experienced that and I saw that. And I became a guy that people would just I would just go out and check out houses for me. They say, "Hey, I want to buy this house. Can you come check it out?" And I didn't call it a home inspection, but my wife said, "Hey, you should get paid for this." And that's
Hmm.
kind of what got me started, in the business. And I worked for a Fortune 500 company before that, which was terrible, and it drove me into depression and all kinds of anxiety. And that's what these big companies do is they burn you up. But I learned so much while I was there about branding and customer service, and then I coupled that in with my experiences as a property manager, and again, I was able to provide a great service to residential clients and take care of them. But now we do that on a grander scale. Now we're inspecting maybe an apartment building where we're making sure things are done right or properly for everyone that lives there. Um, so yeah, we no matter what you do, you got to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. The money will come if you're doing
Yeah.
things for the right reasons. It'll the money will come.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I say, it warms my heart because I have found I come from the big city as well. I come from the Chicago market. You're up in the Milwaukee market. We're right next to each other, but I come from that market, and there are inspectors that we all know in every market that they're only there for one thing, and that's what they believe to be easy money or get rich quick instead of I provide this very valuable service. And so to hear somebody else espouse that again, it just tickles me to no end.
And the
So,
new thing on the sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
yeah.
I just want to kind of elaborate to expand on that a little bit. On the commercial side now, the new thing is not necessarily new, but that next level of that is home inspectors that say they do commercial,
Wow.
and they haven't done any training, and they aren't a part of CCPIA or any association. And so, although not to say that they're doing bad jobs on the residential side, but they don't have any formal training. They don't have resources to lean to. So, and that's why CCPI is important, and being certified is important.
Yeah, and have you found that makes your proposals easier to win and your conversations for your clients easier to secure their confidence because of your membership?
With actual commercial investors and owners, yeah. With people who are just going out there and buying their first commercial property and really doesn't know what goes into it, no, they're just looking for the cheapest price. So, but that's fine.
Yeah.
That's okay. If I went over the property owner that's not hiring me for a purchase, but they're hiring me to inspect 60 buildings that are over 100,000 square foot each. If I have him sold, then I'm fine with that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, your testimony is enough when you say you're doing you're averaging 4 or 5 a week. I mean, that's enough to make anybody's commercial inspection career very, very successful. So, is there anything we haven't touched on that you want to share with those about your journey and about growing your business?
Well, I think the people who are going to watch these videos are going to be people who are looking to get in commercial, are growing commercial, and I'm still growing. I'm always going to be growing, and I think a good inspector knows they're always going to be learning. Uh, for me, it's like I started over. It's there's an excitement, there's a sense of nervousness sometimes in growing the business. There's a sense of, am I doing things wrong? Sometimes business comes in waves, and I think it's critical that you are conscious of the fact that sometimes you work in the business and sometimes you work on the business, and sometimes it's hard to work in the business if you're doing 4 or 5 commercial inspections in a week.
Mhm.
um it's hard to work on the business when you're working that much per se. And what's going to happen is you're going to have a week or two that it slows down, and you're going to panic, and you're going to say, "What am I doing wrong?" That's the time that you work on the business. That's the time that you work on your SEO, and you follow up with the people you met at your local realtors association, and you offer to take some folks out to lunch. You don't panic in that time. You kind of follow the plan that maybe you have in place that you hadn't leaned back to your business plan per se. So never get too high, never get too low, just like when you're on the inspections. You do that in your personal life. You never get too high. If I have a week where I have 5 inspections, I know the next week maybe I don't get a call. But that's the time to make sure, hey, I need to go reply to all these Google reviews. I got a bunch of 5-star reviews out there. Work
Yeah,
on.
yeah. All right, we're back recording again. I'll make sure that we cut out that last little bit. So you want, yeah, why don't you pick it up where you got to work on your business as well as you work in your business.
Yeah, for sure. So, in business is going to come in waves, and in a time when business is slow, you're going to panic. You're going to wonder what you're doing wrong, and a person like me and other people have made it to this level, you're not going to sit around and do anything. So that's the time when it's slow to work on the business. You probably had a business plan to start with, hopefully or ideally, at least somewhat of an idea outline. And that's the time to go back to that business plan. That's the time to work on your SEO when things are slow. That's the time to go out and have lunch and connect with people and make sure you hit those realtor association meetings and follow up on those business cards that they give you when those times are slow. So take advantage of it being slow. Try not to get stressed when it's slow and just kind of stay at it per se. Also, keep in mind that leads are going to come from different places. They're not going to just come from realtors. So, I would say that maybe 60% of my work actually involves a transaction. Sometimes there's insurance companies that
Mhm.
need me to go out. Sometimes it's a lender. Sometimes there's a company that already owns the buildings and they just haven't been in these warehouses for 20 years. They just want to know what's going on. So you don't necessarily put all your eggs in one basket. If you've watched these videos, you know that the commercial sector of inspections it's still in its infancy. And I've been a part of meetings and spoken with commercial realtors, and they almost seem like they don't realize it's a thing sometimes. And it's up to us to educate them, but just don't be taken back. Don't get too upset over it. Try to stay even. Try not to get too high and too low. And take advantage of the slow times because it won't always be slow. It'll be too busy at some point, and then you'll wish you had a little time to breathe.
I think that's terrific. I think, Rick, I think that is the perfect summary of how you've built your business, how you've how you've developed your referral sources, and how you're successful enough to have, you know, 4 or 5 inspections. That's a couple hundred commercial inspections a year. I mean,
Yeah.
for most people, a couple hundred could be a career.
Now, it's not every week. I still get some slow weeks. There's some weeks I might be two or three, yeah, we're certainly getting there. It's going to be a great year. So I'm excited for what takes place. I have a great partner to kind of shuffle some of my residential leads to, and I still enjoy, some residential here and there just to help people out and stay polished. But for commercial, it's exciting. And I just left a local realtors association roundtable event, and there were people who I didn't even know who said, "Hey, I hear that guy's really good," and it's great to hear that because that means the brand's starting to grow to reach to even people that I haven't worked with. So that's exciting.
That's terrific, Rick. I'm proud of you. I'm gonna put some links in the end of this video so people can check out your website, see what you got going on, and who knows, you might even get a few members reach out to you and want you to be their mentor.
Yeah. Well, that 2.5 hour drive I got to take a couple times a week sometimes, or hour here, 45 minutes there. That windshield time is always a good time to put the phone on speaker and have a conversation.
I That's perfect, Rick. Thank you so much for taking some time today. This
Yep,
has
you're
been
welcome.
Building Your Business with Rick Francis.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.